And with that, we welcome you into another episode of Church Pew Sports, connecting sports to life and faith. And it is so good to have you all with us a week after what we're still hearing from a lot of you about, which was our NFL draft of biblical characters only. And with Joshua being the one pick, I thought that was a pretty sound choice by Pastor Josh Pardee. But Paul, nobody outdid your selections that were fueled by ChatGPT, and that's what's getting most of the conversation. My wife came home from a little road trip, and she had been listening to it, and she said, "Yeah, I like Paul's pick. I would have picked whatever it was. Who was that again?"
What was his name? He was Og, the king of something.
Yes.
I just asked ChatGPT who is the largest human in the Bible. That's all I did. And I went with that guy. So it's
We
perfect.
had fun with that episode, and then after that episode, the real NFL draft took place, and boy, oh boy, there continues to be a lot of conversation around the draft, and sometimes for really entertaining and insightful reasons, and sometimes for really embarrassing reasons like prank phone calls and things like that. So we're going to kind of take a little dive into all of it. We won't go pick for pick. We're going to go like news item and topic for topic because the individual players, except for one of them, really are not the lead story of the NFL draft.
Yeah.
His storylines really coming out of that. And I am so excited to welcome into the podcast for the first time Bryce Johnson from the Unpacking It podcast, Sports and Faith podcast. He comes to us from North Carolina. And Bryce, I was telling you off air that I looked back at our very brief Twitter/X direct message conversations, and they date back to 2023. We've been trying to get together on this podcast that long. So I'm glad you're here. And how are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thrilled to be with you guys. Thankful for the opportunity. And man, what a weekend it was with the draft. So fun to dive into that today. That's for sure.
Okay, Bryce, we do have like a little hazing ritual that we take all first time guests through on the podcast. It's nothing too painful, but I just have one question that we would like you to answer for all of our listeners so they can get to know you a little bit. We would like to know, who are your irrational sports loyalties? Like, who are the teams that you follow at kind of those just a little bit beyond absurd levels where your family or other sports fans tell you that you should dial it down a bit?
You're
Who would that be for
crazy.
you?
Yeah, you're crazy.
Well, I guess that would be well, I could go two ways. One, I'm a Cameron crazy. I'm a Duke fan. So there's definitely an element of that. And growing up in Charlotte, you're basically a Carolina fan or a Duke fan. And so in fifth grade, I picked Duke. And at that time, it was little Steve Wojciechowski, and I was a little point guard myself playing in the neighborhood. And so I was like, all right, I identify with that guy. So growing up as a Duke fan, I was nuts because I would say the majority of my friends or people at school were Carolina fans. So I was always entering the lunch table, outmanned and having to defend the Dukies. Thankfully, I went through some nice runs there with some good eras of Duke basketball. But anyway, that was just a crazy time. And so continuing to be a Duke fan is definitely one of those elements. But I'm also staring at my Charlotte Hornets flag, and that is an irrational fandom because they stay.
Yeah.
They they left our town. They went to New Orleans. Then the Bobcats came and they were horrendous for a number of years. And now the Hornets are back and I still love them. I went to a game this year, had a blast, but they are not very good on the court. So there you go. That's some of my fandom.
Yeah. Hornets fan by definition, I would say, is irrational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fair.
They had the most famous owner, perhaps, in all of basketball, but things did not go so well. And for those of you who are watching this episode, you understand what I'm about to describe. For those of you who are listening, go to the Church Pew Sports YouTube channel and just check out the visual for Bryce Johnson's podcast studio. He is surrounded, I mean, surrounded by stuff, including on the front end of the desk, bobbleheads and figurines galore, everybody you've ever heard of. And behind him, I actually thought, Bryce, at the outset, I thought that was like one of those Zoom backgrounds that you just made in Photoshop. But these are all hard, tangible items hanging on the wall. He's got a Kobe Bryant. He's got a Del Curry, I believe, jersey,
Hmm.
Peyton Manning. He's got an Appalachian State something over there. Now,
Oh, let's give some time to that.
no,
That's
let's
right.
just kind of figure out where we're going with that because as a Michigan man, that caught my eye right away.
All right. So you still got to you got to say the name right. Appalachian State, right? So we start there.
Yeah.
And now we kind of go by App State now that we're a little more familiar around the country, thanks to that big win at Michigan.
We
And
did weekend.
I happened to be at that game. So
Come on.
it was legendary. It was a special time for me. I was a student at App, was there with my two brothers, my dad, my three uncles, and my grandpa who went to Michigan. So we were all at that game.
Oh, wow.
I rode up with my buddies from college in one of our buddies' mom's vans. So it was a road trip to the game, and it was epic. So I'm thankful that I experienced that, and sorry for Michigan fans.
For games like that, where it's kind of a here's your paycheck, don't bother us kind of a game, they probably put most of the visiting fans up in the very top levels of the big house. Were you up there at in the clouds, so to speak?
Yeah, they were decent seats, but they were definitely further up, and there were only 4,000 of us, and so we were scattered actually. So I was amongst the Michigan fans, and they were very arrogant, walking in, sitting down,
Come on.
most of the game, and we had the last laugh. That's for sure. So it was quite the experience, and then to walk out of that, talk about being outmanned. I mean, 4,000 fans in the midst of almost 100 was pretty wild.
Let me just say this on behalf of all Michigan alumni. This is the first I've ever heard the accusation of arrogance thrown our way. I've never heard such a thing before.
The phrase we use around here for Michigan men is notoriously pretentious.
Oh,
That's
man.
that's the phrase that we use. Okay, so tell us about your podcast. We at least gotta give a few minutes to hearing about what you do. I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, so I lead a ministry for sports fans called Unpacking It. And so my passion is to see sports fans following Jesus. And so each week we host a show that takes a current sports story, relates it to the Bible, relates it to life. So tomorrow's show will be about the NFL draft, and well, I'll probably get into that topic even as we're talking about Shedeur Sanders and the draft. But basically we're taking kind of sports stories and relating to the Bible. And so I write a devotional Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm wearing my shirt today, Fantasy Football Fellowship. We've got a ministry that really impacts fantasy managers. And so we've been to how fantasy leagues are built in small groups. And so we bring the content to fantasy leagues so that they can meet for league meetings, talk about faith, fantasy, and life together. And ultimately grow in the relationship with the Lord, and then also grow together in real relationship. And so I've been doing this. This is my 12th year. And so my background's in sports radio, but God changed my heart and gave me a new vision and passion. And so thankful to continue to do what we do at Unpacking It. And it's a lot of fun.
That's so cool to hear.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the fact that you've been at it for over a decade means somebody's listening somewhere, right? And that's and they're engaging in the ministry side of it, which is kind of the whole point behind why we started Church Pew just, I think, 3.5 years ago. Paul and I were actively engaged in texting each other like crazy during every big sporting event. And at some point I said, this really should just be a podcast. And that's kind of what was the genesis of it. And I work in television and radio, and so had some of the basics and studio stuff and all that. So then Paul went and moved away because he got tired of the Michigan man, and so now we connect remotely. But really glad to hear about the Unpacking It ministry. We'll put a link to all of that in the notes, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on however you get your podcasts. Let's dive in a little bit to the NFL draft. I want to go with your number one headline. What's your takeaway from the NFL draft? If somebody landed here from Mars and said, give me one sentence summary of what you think the draft's biggest story was. Paul, you start us off.
Well, like other than Shedeur, you mean?
Well, it's just whatever your lead is.
I would probably say the most intriguing thing to me about the draft this year was all the quarterback, just the drama around the quarterback position. So Shedeur was a part of that. Cam Ward is the number one pick overall, and we haven't even ever like heard anything about him or talked about him at all in the aftermath of the draft. And then I was listening to some stuff today where they were talking about how um, there were no third-year college quarterbacks drafted this year. I think that's fascinating. Like guys like they were talking about how guys like Cade Klubnik and Drew Aller and some of the other guys that could have come out this year and chose not to because they could make more money in college probably, or maybe they didn't think they were ready or whatever it was. And so that's like, is that a thing or is that just a one-off for the 2025 draft? And so I just think all the intrigue around the quarterback position would be my headline.
Yeah. How about you, Bryce?
So I'll actually go to the running back position and the fact that, 2 years ago, we're talking about the position dying and the NFL's moving away from the running back. We don't value the running back anymore. And we're not giving you, a second contract and all that kind of thing. To then, we come off the Super Bowl, Saquon Barkley, of course, is the story. Derrick Henry was awesome. And now in the draft, teams go, oh, wait, yeah, the running back is important. Let's load up. And so, there are 10 to 15 legit running backs that will have an opportunity to either be 1A or 1B or the number 2 running back, I guess. In those types of, situations, most teams will run a committee these days, unless you got Barkley or Henry. But the fact that, a number of teams went in to grab a running back and, Ashton Genty being a top pick from Oakland, Las Vegas, that was a sort of a telling sign of this year's draft as well. And so, yeah, I think he's going to be awesome. And then when I look at things from a fantasy football standpoint, so I care about the running back position and, how early will those guys be drafted. But when we've seen top running backs go early, they usually hit. They really do. Yeah. And so there's a lot of, I think, optimism that Genty can be that kind of guy. So that would be my big takeaway.
Yeah, I think I would summarize it with I don't even know if it's a clean one sentence, but I really think that we saw what happens when a player genuinely commits to the game and goes through what they may even determine as silly little steps along the way. The interviews, the diagramming, the plays in the meeting rooms in Indianapolis and all those different things versus coming in entitled and arrogant. And I know we're all thinking about the same person, but so I guess my summary would be, if using too many words to get there, is that we saw dedication, commitment, and passion rewarded, and we saw arrogance and disassociation punished. And so I guess that'll lead us into some of our Shedeur conversation. And I don't know the kid. Everything I'd ever heard of him is that he's a very nice young man. And then you start to hear the stories come out from team meetings, wherever they happen to take place, where he's keeping his headphones on, where he's refusing to diagram plays, where he's not engaging or taking part in the things that everybody does as a potential employee. Like we heard from Colin Coward at the beginning, a potential employee, your employer is going to want to put you through those basic paces. We've got a few sound bites with some of the national media folks kind of sharing their perspective on all this, and we'll certainly get into it on our own. Let me first take you into Tiki Barber and his thoughts on what happened with Shedeur.
It used to be that there were flags thrown at kids coming out of college for 1, injury, 2, character issues. But now there's a third one, and it's basically doesn't love football. And that can come in a couple of ways. Like, I'm just here because I'm good at this. I don't love it. I don't want to be great. I'm just good at this, so that's why I'm doing it. Or I don't need to grind to go get paid.
Is it possible, guys? Is it possible to play college football at a very high D1 level and to do it on a national stage and to get lots of attention and $6 million in NIL money? Is it possible to do all of those things and not love football?
Yeah, it makes me wonder if all the changes in college football are contributing to that, with the NIL stuff coming in and all the entitlement and the player movement and the lack of loyalty to your college program. And kind of I can take or leave the college culture that I'm a part of. And so maybe that's part of why guys are not leaving college with this deep-seated love of the game. But I don't know, man. And maybe it's just the culture continues to trend in not a great direction. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating element in comparing a guy's desire to be great at football versus a desire to be a football player and be a part of the NFL. Yeah. And I see it all the time in the NBA, especially because it's so obvious. The guys that just love being NBA players and they sign their contracts and they love all that comes with it. You don't see it quite as much in the NFL, but you do, because you see those guys fade out. They don't make it. Like, they don't last long. They don't get that second contract, and it's pretty clear. And so, but normally, I don't know if we identify it on from the college to the pro level as much as we're seeing it now because of the NIL, because the money has already entered in a significant way. And so I think now we're just figuring it out earlier. Usually I think we identify, these rookies come in and they're all about the money. They're all about just making it to the NFL, and they're not interested in getting better, watching game film, going the extra mile, all that kind of thing. And then now they're a draft bust. It's not going to work out. But now the question marks, I think, that teams have, now we're seeing it in the draft process, because we've always heard, character matters. And then we see knuckleheads get drafted early. This year, it didn't necessarily happen, or they slip a little bit. But to slip, we saw a number of guys slip. It wasn't just Shedeur, but for different reasons.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bryce. I was thinking about Quinn Ewers, the quarterback from Texas, right? And how I remember when he declared, everyone was talking about, was that a mistake, or should he have stayed for another year to Texas, or should he have transferred somewhere else to get out of the way so Arch could, not to get out of the way, but just to be the man somewhere so Arch could take over at Texas. And they were saying, I was reading somewhere, they were saying that going into last year's pre-draft conversation, they were talking about Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck and Shedeur as first-round quarterbacks. Not anymore. I mean, Shedeur wasn't, and now Quinn just got drafted in the 7th round. And so it's like his decision process on whether or not he's like, I'm just done with college and I'm ready to go take on the next challenge, and I love this sport, versus where am I going to make the most money, and all the other things that have to go into that decision-making process for him. Just a way more complicated landscape.
Well, and especially in the Power 5 world, where it's accurate to say that a lot of players will make more money in college than they will as a third stringer in the NFL, or, a 4th round draft pick. They're not going to go broke. They're not going to be driving DoorDash, but they're going to make more money in college than. So what does that do to the hunger level for the work that you have to put in? I don't care how great a college player you are. The NFL is a different beast altogether. The speed is different. The physicality is different. All of it is different. And it requires a level of preparation above and beyond even the hardest of two-a-days you had in college.
Okay.
But what if I made $4 million a year in college, and now I'm going to sign a deal for a team as an unrestricted free agent or as a 5th round draft pick, and I'm going to get $500,000 a year to put my body on the line and be cannon fodder on the practice squad or whatever? Is my hunger still there? Because maybe my motivation was, I grew up in a very rough environment. I've dreamed about getting mama home, getting dad a car. Well, I did that when I was a junior in college. Right. Yeah. So what happens to the hunger level? And this is not trying to sound like the old man who in the old days it was good like this, but I'm just kind of curious as to whether or not it is in some cases, not all of them, but perhaps in the case of the one we're mostly talking about today, comes from great wealth. For all of the good that Dion does in the lives of young men, and he does do a lot of good, we also remember in his professional career where he would literally matador a player coming at him and he would say, I made a business decision. He would give up the touchdown versus giving up his body. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, he's in the Hall of Fame. So I get it. It's all good. But is that part of the hunger issue? So let me take you over to Damian Harris talking about Shedeur, former NFL running back.
Kids hold all of the control and all the power when it comes to college football. Whenever that starts to transcend and work its way and leak and creep into the NFL, that's when the owners are going to put their foot down. That's when the league is going to put its foot down and say enough is enough. And I think this is the perfect example of it. And unfortunately, it does have to be Shedeur. We can sit here and talk about how great he is as a quarterback, how accurate he is, how he stands in the pocket and delivers the football under pressure. He does a lot of things well. But at the end of the day, this is not about Shedeur's play. This is about the fact that he is the most polarizing, the brightest example of what college football is becoming. And he is going to suffer because of it. He is suffering because of it, because the NFL is looking at him like he's our prime suspect of somebody we can make an example out of and send a message. And that is exactly what the NFL is doing.
I don't know. Okay. Because that would then insinuate that teams care more about message sending than they do about winning if they are truly willing to overlook a generational talent. So Bryce Johnson, was the NFL colluding to send a message to Shedeur Sanders?
I don't think so. I think there were only a couple of teams really eager to get a franchise quarterback. That in this draft, they were setting out to get a franchise quarterback. And then the rest of the teams were looking for backup quarterbacks or developmental quarterbacks. And those guys will come in, they'll fit in, they'll work hard. It's not it's a different story. Whereas Shedeur, you either want him as your franchise guy and he's going to come in and get all the attention and all the storylines, or you just can't have him as a backup. So I just don't think the pool of teams was deep enough. And then when you're Cleveland, it's like you got nothing to lose. I mean, it's just like, all right, fine, 5th round, we better go get him.
Our second QB.
They traded up to
be diligent. We tried to be diligent and say, all right, we're not gonna go after the flashy guy. Not that he's like Johnny Manziel, but we know how Cleveland can be sometimes. So anyway, to me, it speaks more to, hey, listen, Pittsburgh was looking for a quarterback, and the Giants and the Titans, of course. But after that, who was really looking for a starting quarterback?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. And I also think if you're a GM and you didn't have a 1st-round grade on Shedeur, that's when the other stuff starts to become part of the conversation. Because if you think he's a lock, he's going to be your franchise guy, then you overlook that stuff, and because the NFL is a business, it's about winning, right? But if you're a little more lukewarm on him, then you're not going to pick him when you can pick some of these other guys and not take on all the headaches that you're afraid are going to come with them. So I think you're exactly right.
It's fascinating for me to hear those who live in this space, the Mel Kipers of the world, and we'll hear from Mel in a couple moments. And then the other draft experts who have completely polar opposite perspectives on this. And some of them say the league just wanted to send a message. And then the others will say the guy just really isn't all that good of a quarterback. And if he were, he would have been taken sooner. Here's Damian Woody on Shedeur.
I'm here to tell everyone out there, everyone who watches the NFL draft, who loves the NFL, trust me when I tell you this. If you're that guy, they're going to pick you in the 1st round, because the NFL and all these teams are in the winning business. If you can help a team win, they are going to pick you. The NFL clearly felt that Shedeur Sanders was a good prospect, but he wasn't what the young people call, he wasn't him.
So which side of this ledger are you coming down on? Immense talent, but too big of a headache? Not an immense talent. Headache's irrelevant to the whole thing. Where do you go in that evaluation? And maybe it's organizational specific, depending on what your chemistry is like and what your locker room is like. Maybe you have a team like Cleveland, they'll put up with anything. I mean, look at the money they gave to Deshaun Watson. And then you'll have a team like, let's say, Detroit, where Dan Campbell's not going to have that kind of factor in his locker room. They're trying to change the culture, not be more of that same culture. So I don't know, Paul, where are you on this ledger?
I think I'm with Rasheed Wallace, right? Like ball don't lie, right? And the draft has spoken. And the draft said he was a fifth rounder. And so that's the answer. So to me, that means he wasn't a first round guy. He's not a franchise quarterback. He could become one, but he's not one. And just because he's picked in the fifth round, he's still got all the opportunity in the world in front of him. He can come in and work, and that's available to him, especially when he's competing against Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel, I guess, to be the starter, right? Whoever it is in Cleveland. But I don't think the draft. I think the draft told us what's the truth here.
Yeah.
So
one thing I'll add too that I think is interesting, if we look at, just the culture and of course the impact of social media and then now the NIL, this generation coming in, like they've grown up in the me generation. It's all about me and look at me and you have to build your platform and build your brand. And then you're Dion's son. Yeah. And that's Dion. Dion's been doing that before all that, right? That was his thing. So here, here's Shedeur. He's just doing what he thought was kind of normal or right. And man, I've been able to build a platform and my dad's helped me do that. And it's been about me and I'm confident. And now all of a sudden it backfired. And I would guess, I don't know, he probably moved from a second round pick to a fifth round pick because of the extra stuff. And what's fascinating is it's not really that his character's in question in the sense that he didn't do anything off the field. Like he didn't get into trouble like Baker Mayfield did. And Baker Mayfield went number one. So that's interesting. And then, teammates seemed to like him but there was something there that teams saw that they didn't appreciate. And they said, nah, we're not taking him in the second round. It's not worth it.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of investigative reporting going on when you see things like at Shedeur's birthday party, none of his teammates were present. And that is a clear indication. I'm like, oh, come on, people. I mean, let's take a deep breath, try the decaf, let's get a life, and let's stop examining the attendees at somebody's birthday party. Because
that's from the movie Draft Day. That's from the movie Draft Day.
Yes,
it is.
Isn't it?
I'm joking about that.
Well, so at some point, if you're fully invested as a professional draft analyst, you have a requirement. It's sort of like a political pollster. If you're wrong 4 straight election cycles, you're probably not going to be a very successful pollster, and people are going to stop hiring you. If you're a draft expert and you have put your entire reputation on the line for a particular player, and then that player you don't just miss it by a little bit. You miss it by seismic amounts of, and then you double down on it to the point where you even make Reese Davis mad.
That's right. I mean, the nicest guy.
Yeah, to make Reese Davis mad is nearly impossible. He's the nicest guy, and Mel Kiper managed to cross that line and have the hubris to declare that the NFL has been wrong in its quarterback evaluations, not for 1 year, not for 5 years, for 50 years.
But Mel, the draft has spoken. That's right. That's the key, Mel. It's not putting a value judgment on whether those who passed right or wrong. They did. Yep. So now, whenever you're in circumstances in life, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether they're fair or whether they're unfair, you might have to deal with them. That's right. Now Shedeur Sanders has to deal with everything. And for whatever reason, whether he played a minute, microscopic percentage, 0%, or it's a legitimate criticism of the way he conducted himself during the draft process, this was the result. Yeah. Now he has an opportunity to answer it. I think yelling at the NFL about it is not.
There's not a quarterback. Boomer Esiason was not happy when he was the second round pick. Tom Brady was not happy. They dropped. How'd they turn out?
And you know what? Nobody's arguing that. That can happen.
Race, the NFL has been clueless for 15 years when it comes to evaluating quarterback. Clueless. No idea what they're doing in terms of evaluating quarterback. That's proof. There's proof of that.
How many
times say we know exactly what we're talking about with quarterbacks? They don't.
Okay, Bill.
When he says we, he means I. Okay, just so you know, he says when we evaluate, we know what we're doing. He means I.
Yeah. So Bryce, I don't know you. I'm a Chicago guy, right? So I'm a Bears fan. So I have my share of baggage from the years of being a Chicago Bears fan and the quarterback position. with them. I just want to remind you guys of Mel Kiper Jr.'s top 5 draft eligible quarterbacks from 2017 going into the draft. Number 1, Mitch Trubisky. Number 2, Deshaun Kaiser. Number 3, Deshaun Watson. Number 4, Luke Falk. In case you don't know, he's, I think, Washington State or something like that. And Mel Kiper's number 5 was Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. Maybe Mel just forgot that in 2017 he also didn't know
Embarrassing.
what he was doing.
When did he say, I will retire if Jimmy Clausen is not like MVP or something like that?
I'm a Panthers fan. That was a big whiff. I went to every game that year, every single game at Panthers Stadium.
How did that work for Jimmy?
Yeah, not good. Not good at all.
So when I pull in sound bites for the podcast, I label them just whatever. And I labeled that one Kiper being dumb. What is the upside to saying something that outlandish, except to make a fool of yourself? Because in order for Mel to be right, that for 50 years the NFL has mangled the quarterback assessment, for the NFL to I guess pass whatever Kiper's litmus test is, every quarterback selected, and by the way, there are more selected than there are starting jobs, but every quarterback selected would have to be a starter in the NFL. That would indicate that the NFL had some clue as to how to assess quarterbacks. So, Bryce, you have personally felt the downside of the Kiper curse. If you're an ESPN executive, are you having a conversation behind closed doors that say, Mel, best of luck to you working for Fox Sports or in your next endeavor as a YouTube host? We've reached our end.
Well, from what I gather, the ratings were through the roof. So the NFL draft is a huge hit. So there are 3 different networks. I'm curious which network you guys watched. I'm preference to NFL Network and Daniel Jeremiah, who's an App State guy. But I like that crew. And then I also love Reese Davis and that crew as well. So the Mel Kiper version is 3rd on my personal list, but people still love Kiper because he's been doing it so long. So I'm not sure that this statement or his outlandish, like he's always been outlandish, and that's part of the shtick. But I actually happened to catch, I turned on the draft, the very end, the final 5 or 10 picks, and they were celebrating Mel Kiper in an unbelievable way. I mean, they were bowing down to Mel Kiper and telling him, you're the reason the draft is what it is. You started this thing. Like, you made this happen. He was taking all the credit for what the draft is. It was unbelievable.
Was it like a eulogy or something?
Yes, it was unbelievable. And then the craziest thing, you guys got to go back and watch this. They bring out pumpkin pie.
Yes.
Pumpkin pie. Did you see this? Pumpkin pie and some other adult beverage. And they were all celebrating with him. But here's the funny thing. Mel Kiper refuses to eat food in front of people. They put this on television. This was television. This was the end of the draft. I was sitting in my chair laughing, going, this is off the rails. This is off the rails. So back to your question, Bill, about what do they do with Mel Kiper? They're all in the circus, on the circus. The circus of Mel Kiper, they're in. So
I got to go back to that one statement. He refuses to eat food in front of people.
Yeah. He doesn't go out to dinner. I mean, he's married, so I can't imagine he's got to eat in front of his wife. They didn't get into that, but that was the story. They're like, this guy. So this is he's an interesting character.
I have heard that he doesn't have a cell phone. I have heard that.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's to your question, by the way. I didn't watch a lot of draft, but I watched NFL Network until they got into some long form, unrelated interviews during the second days and stuff. I mean, they started interviewing like the town councilman or something. I don't really care, or something about dogs. But I happen to enjoy something that Paul detests, which is Rich Eisen's commentary whenever a Buckeye is chosen. I have some fun with that. And right. but I did watch probably more ESPN this time than NFL Network. Paul, you're on ESPN, right? You can't stand Eisen.
Well, yeah, but then Desmond Howard shows up on ESPN. So it's kind of like, what are you supposed to do? Here's my thing on Mel Kiper, right? Like, he either had to come out and say, yeah, I completely whiffed, and everybody would have respected that, or he had to double and triple down on his selections, and that was what he chose to do. And like you said, Bryce, the ratings were great, and so I think he sticks around. I think I'm like, if Lee Corso can still be on College Game Day, then I think Mel Kiper Jr. can be on the draft as long as he wants to be on the draft.
Well, Lee is done. So,
well, as of, yeah,
it's got
more time.
One more game. Okay, last question regarding draft. And Paul, you wrote this one. I think it's really a good question. Would you rather be a 6th or 7th round pick or an undrafted free agent? So you've made it through 2.85% days out of 3 days of the draft, and your name's not been called. And now, are you kind of hoping your phone doesn't ring because then you're looped into a particular team, or would you like to have your options open? It's interesting. And Bryce doesn't know this, but in Saginaw, where I'm located, we're right near Saginaw Valley State University, a D2 school with a football program that has actually sent a number of players to the NFL, but most of them in recent years through the undrafted free agent route. And then they've, in some cases, ended up sticking around. So I've been able to see kind of the coolness of that route, although it would be a little nerve-wracking because no team has anything invested in you. So they have you talk about putting in the work. You have got to go in and make a statement in a big hurry. And there's a funny story from years ago, and I'll shut up and let you guys answer the question. There was an undrafted free agent in Lions training camp during the Barry Sanders era, who's a linebacker. Wayne Fonts was the coach. That's how long ago this was. And at training camp, this kid wanted to make a statement. And so he hit Barry. And Wayne walked over to him and said, "Young man, I don't know your name, and nobody else is going to either. You're out of here. You do not hit the franchise." So, you got to kind of walk within the boundaries. So, Bryce, you want to be 6th, 7th, or UDFA, as they say?
I'm going undrafted.
Yeah,
I want the options. And this is a philosophical question that the NFL is never going to do this, but in many ways, that's what should happen. Everyone should be undrafted, and you get to pick what team you come in as a free agent, and you figure out where's the best fit, where you want to play, instead of being forced to go somewhere. I mean, if you really pull back, it's like, that's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
Of course, that's how it's all built and all that. But if you could be an undrafted guy and identify a team that's like, I think I'm better than those 3 linebackers. I'm putting myself as a linebacker. So I think I can go to that team, and I could beat those guys out. And if there's any interest from them, it's like, yeah, I'm going there. So that would be my perspective.
Yeah, that's really good. I think you're right. That's never going to happen because the smart people would say that's going to kill competitive balance.
Yep.
If they went to something like that. Although I heard Josh Pate on his podcast talk about how after the first 3 rounds, everybody should just be either in UDFA or they should be allowed to go back to college. I'm like, okay, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Then Quinn Ewers could say, well, 7th round pick, or I can go. Didn't last year there was talk about him going to Michigan for a year?
Yeah, well,
he could go be the quarterback at Michigan and buy a season till Bryce Underwood is ready, right? And make $1 million or whatever, more than that he would make.
Well, I was just going to say that right now, college has become unrestricted free agency. And so for these kids who are used to bouncing around, and by the time you see him play in the Rose Bowl, they put his resume up on the screen. You're like, he's attended 6 schools. What are we doing here? When they go to the NFL, it's going to be more of a culture shock. What do you mean I can't just leave here and go play in Dallas?
Yeah.
I don't like the coach yelled at me. I don't like the way this.
So here's a perfect example from this year's draft. Seth McLaughlin, center for the Buckeyes, right? As an Ohio State guy, I'm hoping he gets drafted because he would have been the 15th pick and they would have tied Georgia for the most draft picks ever, whatever. He doesn't get drafted. He was the Remington Award winner, but he tore his Achilles. So the injury kept him out of the draft. And I saw an interview with him. And they asked him, would you rather have been picked in a later round or whatever? And he ended up going to the Bengals signed a free agent contract. And he's like, I chose my team. I don't have to move. My family all lives. Ohio is home now. And he had all of these reasons. And then he kind of had this lucid moment where he's like, I guess the only reason why I would maybe answer that I wanted to be drafted is because it would have been a pride thing. Other than that, there's no reason I'm better off being an undrafted free agent. I thought that's actually a pretty balanced answer.
And when they eventually make the Hallmark movie of your life, it's a pretty cool story if you go the Kurt Warner route from undrafted to MVP. So good stuff. And for whatever it's worth, I mean, I could have kept on downloading more and more clips of commentary about the Shedeur thing. In the end, I think everybody would agree on one thing. Whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whether you think he's a great quarterback or you don't think he's going to be a great quarterback, I don't think anybody would suggest that this prank phone call was a good idea at all.
Hey, is this Shedeur? This is Mickey Loomis here, the GM of the New Orleans Saints. How you doing? This is Mickey Loomis here, GM of the Saints.
How you doing?
Good. How are you, man?
Good. Been waiting on you.
Yeah, we have. It's been a long wait, man.
So we've got a couple of college kids at Ole Miss, one of whose father is a coach for the Falcons. And before the draft, every player who's thought possible of being drafted, their contact information is put into a league-wide directory so that every team, if you've ever wondered, how are they reaching this guy in his living room? Everybody has the numbers. As you register for the draft, that's part of the deal. And in Shedeur's case, he literally got a new phone just for this call. It's not his phone that he normally uses. It was just for this day. And then the son of the Falcons coach found the directory on Dad's iPad laying around the house, makes this call. It goes on for like 3 minutes. While we listen to it in hindsight, of course, it doesn't sound very convincing. But in Shedeur's case, where he's been a little bit on edge, it sounded convincing. And in a world of cynicism and easy critiques, I've been pretty pleased to realize that I have not yet seen one voice anywhere who said, that was the funniest thing ever. That was so cool. This kid has been pilloried for all of this. And it's the first time that, at least in my case, that I felt like, man, I mean, Shedeur, nobody deserves that, in that moment. So I don't know what you guys thought about it, but that seemed to be the one unifying thing about the whole Shedeur saga is that was lousy.
It actually kind of humanized Shedeur for me, and I actually thought he handled it pretty well. And so I'm like, I can root for that guy. Set all the other junk aside. I can root for him and at least pay attention to how he does, how his journey unfolds, Yeah.
It seems like for the most part, Shedeur has handled himself well, like through all of this. I mean, there's a lot of humiliation that he experienced from slipping in the draft and then the prank call and all that comes with this. Every show talking about him for 3 days since Friday night or since Friday morning. Since he wasn't drafted. So it's a lot. So yeah, I give the credit to Shedeur for that. And I think that reveals a little bit more about his character. And my guess is this is going to set him up well. And I think he's actually going to have a good career. If he's going to be I'm not sure about the superstar. I just don't know if he has the talent for that, but I think he's going to be all right. I think I lean more toward him having an NFL career versus fading out right away. And again, how he responded is part of that.
Yeah.
And it brings us all back to the reality that you really can't assess a draft until probably 2 years down the road at the earliest. And and then by then we forget who got drafted when and where, and it's all a distant memory. And we're just looking to see who's on the field and how good our team's doing. All right, let's move on from the draft. And this will be Bryce's first chance to be a part of Holy Discontent.
It's time to blow off some steam. Get it off your chest. Rant about what's most bothering you.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about it.
It's time for Holy Discontent.
All right, Paul, lead us off.
Okay, my holy discontent this week is with the last minute of NBA games review process, like the whole thing. It just doesn't work.
Tell me about it.
It bogs down the game. And then the players, it doesn't matter if the call goes against you, even if the video evidence proves that the correct call is being made, it still doesn't matter. And this was, sorry, Bryce, this was exemplified by LeBron after the T-Wolves challenged the call at the end of the game. I think it was last night, and I think we got his soundbite on that.
That play happens all the time. Hand is part of the ball. That's what they say. And I feel like the hand was a part of that ball. I was able to get his hand on top of the ball stripped down and out on him. So seen that play over and over before, but it's what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Having the replay process amped up like that for the last minute of NBA games doesn't solve anything. It just makes it worse.
I will jump in with my holy discontent and say that in the interest of my Pistons, having some sort of a replay of the last shot of a game when no time is left on the clock, and having the league then come out a half hour later and say, yeah, hey, we got that one wrong. I kept waiting for them to say, and since neither team has left the arena, we're just going to pull them back out and let Hardaway shoot some free throws. Here is how the guys at NBA on TNT felt about the end of the Pistons-Knicks game, which was a debacle, to say the very least.
So after the game, Crew Chief David Guthrie, during live play, it was judged that Josh Hart made a legal defensive play. After post-game review, we observed that Hart makes body contact that is more than marginal to Hardaway Jr. And a foul should have been.
Okay, so now Tim should go to the free throw line right now and see if he can make.
Let me tell you something, man. The NBA, they as much as I love it, and it's given me a great life, that's the stupidest thing ever. Like, yeah. How does that actually help the Pistons coming out later? All you're doing is throwing referees under the bus. What? Yeah, we know it was a foul. They missed a call. But to act like, put that thing out, we want to be transparent, like, that don't help the Pistons.
But I ask you a question. All it does is make them more mad.
Make them more mad.
Yes, and as a member of the fan base who seems to be on the receiving end of a lot of league-wide apologies at the NFL and NBA level, he's correct.
So did you see notorious Knick fan Stephen A. Smith talking about it today? And he was like, I thought it was great. And he's like, it was the wrong call, but I thought it was great. So
future president Stephen A. Smith. All right, Bryce, join us in holy discontent.
All right, so the NFL draft is a blast. As an NFL fan, love watching it, and it's remarkable to see these guys get their dreams, come true, and we get to witness it and all that. However, there are only a handful of players who actually attend the draft. The draft is about you. This is your moment. Why aren't you there? We've built this whole event around you, the player being drafted, and you're at home sitting on the couch. You can do that anytime, anywhere. You can go sit on a couch. This is your moment to walk on stage. And here's where my next holy discontent thought is. Just shake Goodell's hand. You don't need to hug Goodell. You don't need to pick him up and give him a chiropractic adjustment. Just relax, shake his hand like an adult. You're in the NFL now. This is not your buddy. This is not even your boss, but this is a guy you're meeting for the first time. You don't need to hug it out. We're not brothers. You're not brothers, okay? And brothers don't shake hands, okay? So there you go.
That was so really good.
Yeah, and Bryce, there's a couple of guys who I thought Goodell should have bought dinner first because it was, oh man, it was wild. Yeah, very, very good discontent for sure. Here is the that guy segment.
Right now, this minute, today, this week.
And this is where we call out somebody who's doing things right, and we want to make sure we praise them with equal fervor. I'm going to make Paul go second because his is like 3 minutes long. So
yes,
that guy is a Michigan man. Now, normally Paul would roll his eyes at this. He probably still will, but Mason Graham, taken very early in the first round, is going to be a fantastic player. I believe I tweeted out, I'm sorry, Mason, because he went to Cleveland, but he did get to go. I think he was 10th overall. And his teammate, Will Johnson.
Fifth. He went fifth, I think.
He went fifth overall. His teammate, Will Johnson, was thought to be a first-round pick, but really, I mean, Will sat out almost all of last year, and whether it was injury or a business decision, he slipped down. And Mason had gone to the podium. He had his first and second date with Roger Goodell. Then he went to his press responsibilities, and then it was time to get in the limo and go to whatever draft party he would have arranged. And before he got in the limo, he stopped and he asked, "Hey, where's Will? What's up with Will?" And they said he hasn't been picked yet. And Mason Graham left his plans and went back in just to sit with his buddy, his teammate, Will Johnson, until he was picked 47th overall. And here's just a little bit of Mason Graham just talking about it.
When I was in the media, after you get picked, you go do a bunch of media. So I was doing media, and I was, continually checking up to see, if Will got picked out. Everyone had him written down in the first round. So, this is kind of, worst case scenario. So, once I found out he was still in there, I wanted to go support him, just like, I know he would support me in that case. All right, I'm about to come back. All right. Yeah, they're still in the green room. I just want to be there for Will.
And you sat there with him the entire night. And as we sit here right now, the second round hasn't started. I have no doubt he's going to hear his name called.
That's kind of a cool thing for teammates to do. And, that's one of those things that Michigan men do, right? They are always together. So I love it. Bryce, do you have anybody you'd like to call out for your that guy before we turn it over to Paul?
You know what? I don't have a fresh one from the draft, but this is probably only a couple weeks old. So since I haven't been on the show, maybe you'll let it slide. But I happened to randomly catch NBA Today in the afternoon a couple weeks ago, and they had this boy on the show from LA whose home burned down. And so him and his dad, the boy was probably 9 years old. Him and his dad were on the show, NBA Today, and they were talking about how of all the jerseys that were burned, they're a big Lakers fan, the Robert Horry jersey was burned. And so he was so devastated. And I'm a Lakers fan, so loved Big Shot Bob. He's a legend. All he's done is won NBA championships or win them championship. And so anyway, he comes on the show and delivers him a signed Robert Horry jersey.
Nice.
And it was just a reminder, because we move so fast from news and stories, and to not lose sight of what happened in LA with those wildfires, and just to see it personal, but then to see a player. There's so many good guys in sports, and it's just those moments that remind you of that. Yeah. So Robert Horry, that guy, awesome.
That's outstanding.
That's really good.
Big shot, really good. Right? All right, Paul, take it away.
Yeah. So my that guy this week is nowhere near as altruistic as that, right? So I love a good moment. And my favorite moment in the draft was when Seth freaking Rollins, the WWE wrestler, came out to announce the Bears pick. I think I don't know if this is a shout out to the guys who organized the draft, or to the WWE, or to the Chicago Bears, saying this is the guy we want to announce the pick because the draft is going to be in Green Bay. I just think it's worth the 150 or whatever just to listen to his whole call of this pick. It's that good.
Here it is.
Oh. Green Bay, Wisconsin! Is that all you got? Come on, you can be louder than that! I know y'all mad because championship gold looks good on the blue and orange. But in all seriousness, Green Bay, we are in the shadow of Lambeau Field. And I love Lambeau Field because the king of the North, the best quarterback in the NFC North, Caleb Williams, is undefeated at Lambeau Field. And in case y'all aren't familiar with my game, let me remind you I am a visionary. I am a revolutionary. I am Seth freaking Rollins. And I am here to tell you that with the 56th pick
Oh
in
my
the
goodness.
2025.
When they're a heel, man, they know how to troll the audience. That is really funny stuff. I was going to play for you the Clay Matthews introduction, Paul. I thought you might enjoy that as well.
Yeah, that was almost Rich Eisen-esque, but it was
that was outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap things up as we do every episode with our 3-minute message.
Homer, I'd like you to remember Matthew 7:26, the foolish man who built his house on sand.
And you remember Matthew 21:17.
And he left them and went out of the city into Bethany, and he lodged there.
Yeah. Think about it.
Think about it. Okay, so every week we end our podcast conversation with a little 3-minute application of whatever it was that we talked about to faith and life. And I'm completely putting Bryce on the spot right now because I want everybody who's listening to this conversation to go out next week or whenever your draft episode comes out. I want them to hear what you have to say, brother. But I'm going to read a verse, and then I'm just going to ask you to tell all of us what it is that we can apply from the draft this past week, how this can apply to all of us, lest we sit around talking about Shedeur and we don't take a look in the mirror. So it's Proverbs 11:2, which says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. What do you got for us?
Hey, man, that's good. So along those lines, what really stood out to me is the fact that how we come across to people matters, and how these players, these draftees came across to these teams, these decision makers, these talent evaluators matter. And so as followers of Jesus, ultimately, whose approval and whose eyes does it matter? It matters what God thinks of us, right? How he views us, and ultimately he sees us in Christ. And so that's the wonderful good news that we have. But we're also called throughout Scripture, and I don't have them all in front of me right now, but how we come across to outsiders matters. And so we want to be able to, represent Jesus well in the way that we live our lives. And so that's going to open up doors to conversations to be able to share the gospel because of how people view us. And so if people's perception of us is we're arrogant, we're a jerk, we're self-righteous, we're not compassionate, well, we're coming across the wrong way. And so we have to make some adjustments. And so there were certain players in this draft, and I think Shedeur Sanders, it's fair to say, the way people viewed him was not great. And so he's got to make some adjustments and make some changes there. But it matters. It matters how people view us. And then kind of the third layer to this. So on one end, it's like, hey, don't worry what people think about you. I got 2 young daughters. It's like, don't worry what people say about you. And it's true, right? We don't have to worry what people think about us. And some of the response from the Sanders is that, right? Who cares what people say about us? We're Sanders and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is true. And when it matters what God cares, how God views us. But it also matters how we come across to outsiders. And we want to be the light of Christ, and we want to come across the right way. And so we have to evaluate that in our own lives. And then the third part of this is we will be hated. We will be persecuted when we live the godly life for our faith. And so, in Scripture, it says that Jesus found favor with God and man when he was growing up. Well, then ultimately we know what happened. He was persecuted and died on a cross because of how people viewed him, right? And so for us, not to that extent necessarily, but it can be for certain people, but we're persecuted and hated, and that's a part of the deal too. So how we're viewed, it's a part of this life that we've chosen as we follow Jesus each day. And so that's the lesson that I took away from all of this, is that these players were viewed a certain way, and that's where they ended up in the draft. And every day we're viewed a certain way, and it leads to different things, sometimes persecution, sometimes opportunities to tell people the reason for our hope and the reason that Jesus has changed our lives.
Yeah, really good. Paul, that reminded me of 2 Corinthians 2:15. For we are to God the pleasing aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and those who are perishing. To the one, we are an aroma that brings death. To the other, an aroma that brings life. And who is equal to such a task? I mean, it's powerful stuff. And Bryce, you kind of led in that direction. So, hey, brother, we're so glad that you were able to come on with us. Thank you so much for doing it. Let's not wait 2.5 years to do this again or whatever the amount of time was. And we would love to continue the conversation. And again, folks, we'll put a link to the Unpacking It podcast in the notes here so that you can go check out what Bryce is doing. And who knows, maybe we'll make it kind of a quarterly feature where we can reciprocate and join each other on the podcast. It was good stuff.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for the opportunity. Great talking with you guys. This was a blast.
Make sure you check us out on churchpewsports.com and connect with us on Facebook and X. And we'll look forward to connecting with you all again next time on Church Pew Sports.